Hello, my name is Teresa Bennett, and I'm the Analyst Coach. I help businesses improve project success through better business analysis. One of the areas I teach about in my courses is regarding creating use cases. Many people that have taken my classes know about them, but either they haven't had the opportunity to create them, they don't know how to create them, or they're just confused by the many different formats that you can do a use case in. Today I'm going to share one of 4 formats that I generally cover during training classes. This format is simple and it will help you define a use case without spending a ton of time doing it, and it's also great for first-timers. Plus, you'll also learn how to use use cases to perform analysis and find potential missing requirements. And then I'll also share with you what you should never do when you're creating use cases for the first time, or really any time, but I definitely like to share this with people that are doing them for the first time. So before we get into that use case, I want to talk a minute about what use cases are used for. What do you think the purpose of a use case is? Most people that I ask that question of will tell me that it's basically to document the flow of events that take place when a user performs a certain function. If I ask why it's important to document that, I usually get a response that it helps the developers to know how to code the solution and the testers to understand how to test it and what results they should be looking for when they're performing that test. And that's correct. As a matter of fact, testers will probably love you if you give them use cases because it makes their job so much easier. They can use them to have a clear understanding of how the solution should function, what the end result should be, and then the cherry on top is that it will also help them more easily create their test scripts. So use cases are a huge value to testers and of course also to developers. However, there's one more benefit to use cases that I rarely hear any BA articulate, and that's the benefit to them. We have a benefit to ourselves of using the use cases. The business analyst can use use cases to help them analyze and verify that they have really solid, complete requirements. And this is huge for you as a BA. To be able to find missed requirements while you're still in the analysis phase or maybe as far as the design phase means that you can fix the problem before it gets too expensive for the project. As you get closer to rollout, in other words, finding missed requirements during coding, during testing, during implementation, or even after you've gone live, it's going to get more costly to correct the issue, and it will be more detrimental to the project. Missed requirements are the number one cause for project failure. So keeping that in mind, I want you to understand that use cases are an analysis tool, not just a form of documentation to pass on to the rest of the team. Even if your organization doesn't include use cases in the formal requirements package that gets handed off to the rest of the team, you can still do them for yourself as part of your analysis. And this format I'm going to show you is fairly simple and it can be used to do just that. So remember, as we're going through this, that one of the points is that we want to use use cases to do analysis to make sure we're not missing requirements. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So this first page that you're seeing here of the use case is it's just a title page. And our use case that we're going to look at is a use case for a company called ABC Office Supplies that offers a retirement plan to their employees. And this project is about the retirement plan system and employees getting set up on a retirement plan and getting payments deducted from their paycheck to put towards their retirement plan. So we're going to walk through one use case that is related to that. There would obviously be many use cases, and we'll talk about that. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to walk through one particular use case. So the next page in the use case template is the revision history, which is standard revision history. The next page that we have here is a list of who are our primary actors and what use cases are they interacting with. So our primary actors we've determined are the employee, the plan manager, and payroll staff. And there may be others, And that's okay. You can keep adding to it as you find them. But for right now, we have identified that we have 3 main primary actors and then the use cases that those actors would be involved in. So for the employee, they would be the primary actor. Now, I will say that they can be a secondary actor of any of these other use cases, right? That there's a time that an employee might be a secondary actor, but what we're determining here in this list is who the primary actor is, and then what use cases they are, in fact, the primary person for. In other words, the primary user or the primary person doing that function. So for the employee, they would be the primary actor when to request a retirement plan, to change their retirement plan, to cancel their retirement plan, to view their retirement plan, to register for payroll deduction for their plan, to unregister for payroll deduction, and to manage other payment options. Then we have the plan manager. The plan manager is going to be the primary actor for creating a retirement plan, for modifying a retirement plan, for deleting a retirement plan, and for generating retirement plan reports. The payroll staff will be the primary actor who generates a payroll deduction, removes a payroll deduction, and generates payroll deduction reports. So right now, that's what we have identified initially as our different use cases and who our primary actors are. So we're going to take one of these use cases and walk through what that would look like in creating that use case. So the use case that we're going to go through is the register for payroll deductions. So that's this number 5 on here. All right, so here we are at our use case, and I have created the use case already, and we're going to walk through these different areas of the use case and talk about them, and then look at analyzing this use case and seeing where we might have missing information or other things that we need to think about in regards to this use case that will help us ensure that our requirements are complete. So first we have our use case ID and name, and it's register for payroll deduction. Who created it, the date that they created it, who is the primary actor, which we've already determined is the employee, and then we have a secondary actor, which is the payroll system, because they are registering for payroll deductions, so the payroll system is going to be getting information from the employee as they're doing this registration. So the system itself, the payroll system, not the retirement system, is a secondary actor. The description for the use case is employee who registers for the retirement plan 1 must be registered for payroll deduction. So we're saying that if they choose retirement plan 1, they don't have an option. They have to register for payroll deduction. The retirement plan will issue a payment request to the payroll system, which will deduct the plan costs from the next scheduled employee payday direct deposit. The trigger, so what's going to trigger this use case, is that the employee requests to register for payroll deduction, or employee says yes when retirement plan 1 asks if he wants to register. Our precondition is that the employee is logged into the retirement plan system, which we're going to be calling RPS through the rest of the use case. Our post condition, in other words, where we will be at the end of the use case, is that the employee is registered for payroll deduction. And you might say in there for retirement plan 1, since we're saying that this is about retirement plan 1. Next, we have our normal flow. So what is going to be the kind of normal process, the happy path process, whatever you might call it? You've probably heard it referred to as the normal flow of events, the happy path, maybe the main flow of events. There's different wordings for it, but it is the normal flow, the average flow, the thing that's going to happen the most, right? So the normal flow is that they're going to register for payroll deduction. That's what they're going to do. And here are the steps that they're going to take to do it. The employee selects retirement plan 1. The employee defines a dollar amount to contribute to retirement plan 1. The retirement plan system asks the payroll system if the employee is eligible to register for payroll deduction. The payroll system confirms that the employee is eligible to register for payroll deduction. The retirement plan system asks employee to confirm his desire to register for payroll deduction. So we've got some sort of confirmation, right, that the person is going to have to take to say, yes, I really do want to do this. If so, RPS asks the payroll system to establish the payroll deduction for the employee. The payroll system confirms that payroll deduction is established, and the RPS system informs the employee that the payroll deduction is established and the amount of the deduction based on the retirement plan percentage or dollar amount, which would be what the employee had selected as his percentage or dollar amount. Then we say that we don't have any alternative flows. There isn't any other path that they can go down, but we do have some exception flows. So exception flows are more related to error handling, things that can go wrong, right? So with the exceptions, we've identified two flows. One is that the employee is not eligible for payroll deduction because remember we have here that the payroll system has to confirm that the employee is eligible. And then our second one is that the employee is already enrolled for payroll deduction for this retirement plan, so they don't need to re-enroll for payroll deduction because they already have it. So those are two exception flows that we've identified. We have also said that this is a high priority use case. And then we have a place where we can say what business rules apply to it. So for example, if you have all of your business rules maybe listed in an Excel spreadsheet and they're all numbered, this is the place where you can say which business rules apply to which use case. So you're saying here to the developer that they need to be concerned with business rules 86, 88, and 74 as far as this use case goes. Then we have some other information. And that's really just a place for a catch-all, right? Anything else that might need to be identified that there just wasn't a place on the form for. So in this case, we said that we should expect high frequency of executing this use case within the first 2 weeks after the system is released, because we've done some analysis and we've determined that retirement plan 1 is the most popular, is going to be the most popular retirement plan, and that there'll be a lot of people signing up for that and therefore signing up for payroll deduction because remember they're required to do that for this retirement plan. So that's just an added note for the development team to understand as far as when they start thinking about things like infrastructure and the system availability and the resources. They want to make sure that they have enough system resources available for the amount of people that are going to be using the system at any given time, right? So this is some additional information that can help them with that. So there's our use case. Now this seems pretty clear, right? It was fairly simple to write. We have a standard set of steps. We're not saying how the system is going to do things, right? So we're saying that the system, for example, on step 5, the RPS system asks the employee to confirm his desire to register. We're not saying how, because we may not know that yet, right? Especially because it's a new system. We also say that the payroll system confirms that the payroll deduction is established and that the retirement plan system informs the employee that payroll deduction is established. So there are things that are happening to make confirmations and to inform the employee of things, but we're not saying how that's happening. Maybe they're going to be informed by an email. Maybe there's going to be a pop-up message on the screen. Maybe there's just going to be a message displayed at the top of the screen. We're not determining how it's going to happen, only that it must happen, that they must be informed, right? So now I want us to take a look at this a little bit more closely and see where we might have some missing information or some questions or some other things that might need to be thought about. So let's go back up to our description for our use case. So we have in the description that an employee who registers for the retirement plan 1 must be registered for payroll deduction. The retirement plan will issue a payment request to the payroll system, which will deduct the plan costs from the next scheduled employee payday direct deposit. So we're saying that they must take payroll deduction if they are using retirement plan 1. And yet we're saying in our trigger that the employee requests to register for payroll deduction, or employee says yes when retirement plan 1 asks if he wants to register. Now, I would argue, why would we ask if they want to register if they're required to register, right? So we may have a conflict there in our requirements, because we should not ask them if they want to, if they're required to, right? Makes sense? So that might be an area that we need to look at and think about and say, hey, is this really the way it should be, or do we need to rethink this a little bit? The other thing that I want to point out about our description is that we say that the plan costs will be deducted from the next scheduled employee payday direct deposit. Not every employee may not have direct deposit, right? Some people may get paper checks still. So unless the company requires every employee to always use direct deposit, we can't say only direct deposit here, because there may be other forms that the employee is getting paid in, like a paper paycheck. So unless the company does that, we can't say that here. So it's something that we would want to check. Maybe the company does require that everybody gets direct deposit, and then in that case, this description is fine. But the point is that we don't want to make an assumption about that. We want to verify it, right? The other thing that I want to point out is, again, in the trigger. So if we look at the trigger, it says employee requests to register for payroll deduction, or employee says yes when retirement plan 1 asks if he wants to. So we've already talked about the one problem related to the fact that we're saying that they have to do it for retirement plan 1, but here we're saying it's a kind of either or thing. The other thing I want to point out about that or statement is that anytime you see something like that where it says or, you want to take a step back for a moment and say, does this really belong here? Because is there really and truly 2 triggers, or is there only 1 trigger for this particular use case? So even if you didn't catch it in the other way, where we were looking at the fact that it's retirement plan 1 says you must be registered for payroll deduction, and then this here says kind of that you can say you want to. Even if you don't catch it there, this or statement should help you catch it as well, right? So there's a couple of different indicators that tell you that there's more that needs to be thought about here. The next thing that I want to point out is another version of the or, which is down here. We have a if so. So when something says if so to me, then my question would be, well, what if not, right? We're saying if it's this way, then this. So could it be another way? If it could be another way, then we actually do have an alternate flow, right? So we're saying here that the RPS system asks the employee to confirm his desire to register for payroll deduction. We've already determined that this might be a problem because we're saying here that they're required to do payroll deduction, right? But assuming they weren't required to do payroll deduction, and we're saying that we're asking them, and they're saying if so, then we would establish the deduction for the employee. Well, what if the employee says, you know what? No, I don't actually desire to do that. I've changed my mind. I don't want to do it, right? So if they don't want to do payroll deduction, then what? So that then what would actually be an alternate flow. So we do, in fact, have a possible alternate flow, right? In the case where they would not be required to register for payroll deduction, right? So that's something else to think about as well. Now let's talk about our exception flows. So we've already identified that we have 2 exceptions here, right? That we have the possibility of error if the employee is not eligible for payroll deduction. So they've said they want payroll deduction. They've chosen a plan that requires them to have payroll deduction, but for some reason they're not eligible for payroll deduction. So we've identified the flow, but we haven't actually put any steps in here. So when you have an exception flow, you would need to have steps for it just like you have steps here. So you could just simply, you could take this and copy it down here just to have a step number in here. And you would renumber So I'm just going to go here and say my numbering is, I just want to change this to be number 1. There we go, restart numbering. All right, so now we're saying that if an employee is not eligible for payroll deduction, here's the first thing that's going to happen. Maybe there will be an error message displayed on the screen, right? So we would say, but we don't know for sure how that's going to be, right? So we're going to, again, be a little bit vague and just say that they're notified. So employee is notified they are not eligible for payroll deduction. So how that notification takes place, again, is determined in the coding part of the process, right? Design and coding. So we're just saying that the employee has to be notified that they're not eligible for payroll deduction. And then if there are any other steps, you would continue and put them there. And then you would do the same thing for this exception flow. You would have to list any steps underneath it that would take place for that exception, right? So this is just other things that have to be thought about. So when you first create your use case and you're first getting your thoughts down, you might think, I did a great use case, right? This is really clear and it has all of the information and you've got all the sections filled out and it on the surface looks like a good use case. But when you start doing some analysis of it, you find that you may have some things that you have put in here that causes a conflict, or you may find that you have some missing requirements or some things that might require you to split it up a little bit more and have a couple of different use cases. So I hope this helps you to see how you can use a use case to do analysis. So now that we've walked through creating the use case, you should be able to see how beneficial it is, not just for documenting a functional flow for developers and testers, but also to do that analysis, right? You see how important that is? I said I would share with you the one thing that you should never do when creating use cases for the first time. And I'm going to do that now, but first I want to show you real quick that that you would just continue using this format for your other use cases. So you know how at the beginning of this we had our primary actors and all of our use cases listed here? After you created this use case, you would just use that same template, which is here, and you would create your other use cases. And you can just keep doing a simple copy and paste of the template and adding on to it so that you have one document that you have all of your use cases in. So you can just continue doing that until you have all of your use cases created. So I just wanted to share that with you so that you would understand how to continue doing that for the rest of your use cases. So now let's go back to the one thing that you should never do when you're creating use cases for the first time. Don't get bogged down in analysis paralysis. And as I mentioned before, this isn't just when you're creating them for the first time, although when you're new to it, it takes some time to get used to what you're doing. So it seems to be something that happens more frequently for people that are just starting out with creating their use cases. So many times I've seen BAs get stuck and continue down that kind of what if path. Well, what if this? What if that? What if that? And they get so far down it that they're no longer even focused on what the original use case was about. So we have to remember to keep our eye on what our use case is really about. I can't stress this enough that you need to stay within the scope of the use case. Just like it's so important to stay within the scope of a project, when you're working on a use case, it's important to stay within the scope of that use case. Continue to go back to the title of the use case, right? What is it that we're doing? And make sure that any alternate flows and exception flows truly are related to that title. In other words, they're directly connected to what you're accomplishing when you're performing this, function, this task, whatever it is. As I mentioned before, this is one of 4 formats that I typically cover in my training classes. If you're interested in learning more about use cases, along with perfecting your requirements elicitation skills, communication skills, and learning how to use many other forms of documentation for analysis and for creating your requirements package, then I invite you to register for the next Mastering Business Analysis Fundamentals course. The Fundamentals course is a 12-week training program that's endorsed by the IIBA. So besides testing and certification straight from the Analyst Coach, you'll also receive 21 professional development units or continuing development units from the IIBA that can be used to meet education requirements to sit for one of their IIBA exams or as credits for recertification if you already hold certification from the IIBA. So you can go to the link below this video to get more information on that training program and get registered for our next upcoming class.